So I'm not trying to paint all Jews with one brush to say that all Jews endorse this kind of racism and racial superiority, because I know it's not true. There are many brave Jews actually right now who are fighting against the genocide of Palestinians. And I consider those Jews to be very brave because they're going against their own people.
So I very much appreciate that, in this world where there are no more facts, at least we can agree on the facts here. So I appreciate that. I checked all the references while you were talking, and yes, they are there. So I wanted to thank you for that, for sticking to the facts, for opening my eyes to this side of things that I didn't see.
What about what you said about the students? What about what you said about the hoaxers? What about that?
Why do you think that that's referring to Jews as a race? When you noted that I tweeted that I do not put all Jews in one category. And as a Muslim, we're not allowed to do that.
How would you... How would you... What age was Muhammad's wife?
I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be unfair to Jews. I don't want to be fair to Christians. I don't want to be fair to atheists. I don't want to be unfair. I want to be completely 100% fair and accurate. So if I make a mistake, point it out and show me the error of my way so I can correct myself. That's the only way we learn and grow. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much to MSA for inviting me, and thank you to the University Administration for not canceling the event and providing us with security. Really appreciate that. Originally, this event was supposed to be a discussion and dialogue between a Muslim and a Jewish either chaplain or intellectual, but unfortunately that didn't pan out. I would have preferred to have more of a dialogue, but since it's just going to be me, I'll have a presentation. It should take about 45 minutes to an hour, inshallah, and then there'll be Q&A. And I hope that in the Q&A we can have our Jewish neighbors ask questions, gain clarification, challenge me. That is more than welcomed. So the title of this talk is Hate and Racism in Judaism and How It Generates Israeli War Crimes. Before we get into some of the substantive points about the Jewish religion, I just want to note, the horrifying genocide that's taking place as we speak against the Palestinians. And when we look at what even non-Palestinian, non-Muslim organizations say, like Oxfam International, about these major charitable organizations internationally, they say that the daily death rate in Gaza is higher than any other major 21st century conflict. The Israeli military is killing 250 Palestinians per day, with many more lives at risk from hunger, disease, and cold. Also, we know about the ICJ ruling, the International Criminal Court of Justice, that finds that genocide is taking place plausibly in Palestine at the hands of Israel. And it orders Israel to stop these genocidal violations and the war crimes. Just today, there was a massacre of Palestinians by the IDF. Palestinians who are going to get aid because they are being starved to death by Israel's blockade of humanitarian aid, blockade of UN aid, United Nations aid. They are starving to death, women, children. And there was some aid that was there, and as Palestinians approached it, they were shot and killed. Over 100 have been killed, 750 wounded. This is a massacre of civilians. And this was reported in many places, and I think 100 killed, that's actually a lower estimate. A quarter of Gaza's population is one step from famine, and aid trucks are being blocked, they're being looted, and this is what the UN is saying. So basically, Israel has decided that, okay, we have killed over 30,000 Palestinians, we have slaughtered over 10,000 Palestinian children, but these Palestinians are so stubborn. They're not leaving and vacating Gaza. Our forced expulsion hasn't worked so far, so let's just starve them to death. And maybe then they'll evacuate and we can take over this land. And I think the calculation that Israel is making is that we have lost so much public trust. We have burned so many bridges in this war. we cannot salvage our public image. So the only way that we can not lose is if we completely vacate and ethnically cleanse Gaza, take it over and settle it. That's the only way we can break even. And anything less than that is going to be a defeat, because we can't defeat Hamas. We have not met any of these objectives that we've had in taking out Hamas. So the only thing that we can really salvage is to take over the Gaza Strip. And how do we do that? Well, we've bombed them to smithereens, killed over 30,000, but starvation is the next move. So this is why they have no shame in actually targeting hungry children going to aid trucks. I think more than what these statistics can convey are images. When we see IDF soldiers who are gleefully playing with Palestinian children's toys, they're going to the remains, basically playing on the graves of Palestinian women, children, and non-combatants. Look at the smile on this IDF soldier's face as he plays with this bike. Look at these IDF soldiers playing with a doll. Palestinian child's doll. It's probably been killed or made into a refugee, probably lost most of its family members, his or her family members. They're just having fun, taking a photo shoot, posting it on Instagram. It's absolutely no shame. And this basically reveals the lie that Israel is not engaged in genocidal acts. Israel is not engaged in ethnic cleansing. They clearly are. They clearly are. Here you have another happy IDF soldier. Look how much fun he's having. Look, these are the toys of 2-year-old, 3-year-olds with their assault rifle sitting on these children's bikes. Like, what is the explanation for this? We're often given the lie that, the operation is just meant to defeat Hamas. We have no problem with the Palestinians at large. Then how do you explain this? And these aren't just random soldiers. Some of these are lieutenants, they're sergeants, they're high officers within the IDF. This kind of behavior is completely allowed. And they have no shame. They have no shame about this. Here is an IDF soldier posing in a crib. A child's literally a crib. Who can explain this? Who can justify this? And then you get into these kinds of horrifying images where the soldiers, these are special forces, by the way, holding up the lingerie and the intimate apparel of Palestinian women. How can you justify this? This is like a big joke to them. So this is shocking. This is shocking. And never have we seen a genocide take place like this that's been documented in 4K because of phone camera technology, because of wireless technology. Everything is being documented. And the usual hasbara, the Israeli propaganda, it's not effective anymore. They haven't adapted, basically. The Israeli Zionist think tanks that come up with the propaganda to say things like, Palestinians use human shields, or Hamas is, doing this or that. They can't they can't explain away this 4K imagery, footage. Social media has destroyed the Israeli Hasbara narrative. And this has become a huge crisis for Israeli PR, Zionist PR. Here was a TikTok video of an IDF lieutenant, I believe, and he's taken some Palestinian high heel shoes and says, here's a pair of high heels for our engagement party. So he's a soldier who's getting engaged. He's stealing the shoes of Palestinians, women, a woman that he has killed or has been killed or displaced. So what is the point of my talk in a nutshell? It's often claimed by Zionists that what causes Palestinians to quote unquote hate the Jews or to hate Israel is because of Islam. Islam is a hateful religion. Islam advocates violence. Islam advocates terrorism. All of this kind of propaganda that's been spread about Muslims for 20 years, the better part of 20 years in terms of the war on terror, but even beyond that, prior to the past 20 years. all of this propaganda against Islam, attacking Muslims, calling Muslims the supporters of violence and hate. And all of this attention has been placed on Muslims and created all kinds of negative consequences for Muslims. Muslims have suffered from Islamophobia, from discrimination, from hate crimes because of all of this negative propaganda against Islam and Muslims, much of it perpetrated by Zionists and Zionist organizations. The Islamophobia network is funded in large part by Zionist organizations, whether they're fundamentalist Christian Zionists or they're Jewish Zionists. So this claim is made about Islam, and there's been this focus and analysis on Islam. What does Islam actually teach, as an explanation in a longer narrative that Islam advocates violence and hate. But what if we turn the tables for at least one talk at a university? What does the Jewish religion teach? What do we find within Jewish texts? What do we find advocated within the main scriptures of the Jewish religion that many Jews, not only in Israel but in America, are devoutly obedient to and believe in the strongest terms? Let's look at some of these texts and we'll see that the Jewish religious tradition is a primary cause, if not the primary cause of this conflict. So it's going to be claimed, it's already been claimed that I spread hate because I'm coming here and I'm criticizing Israel. So that means I'm an anti-Semite, just by virtue of me arguing against genocide and the killing of Palestinian women and children. But let's look at what the teachings of Judaism actually are. Could we say that the teachings of Judaism cause hatred of others? So, racial superiority is one of the main, or a very significant teaching within the Jewish religious texts. And I should give the disclaimer that not all Jews believe in these texts. Not all Jews believe in the racial superiority of the Jewish race. But it is something that is found in Judaism. It is something that has been advocated and taught by the most authoritative figures of religious authorities within the Jewish tradition. But I have to give that disclaimer because there are Jews who fight against this kind of racial supremacy. There are Jews who will actually support the Palestinians against genocide. So I just have to make that disclaimer. So here are 4 points that you'll find throughout, or 4 themes that you'll find throughout Jewish texts. Jews are God's chosen race. Jews are the only real human beings. Jews are semi-divine, as their souls are divine. Jews are the most moral group in the world due to their adherence to the Torah. So what is the evidence for this? You know, these might be shocking claims for those of you who are not familiar with Jewish religious texts. So if we go to the Hebrew Bible in Deuteronomy chapter 7, we'll read, "For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth." So this becomes the basis for a racial supremacy, because the Jewish people, by virtue of the covenant between God and Abraham, the prophet Abraham, are special by virtue of their lineage, biological lineage. So this is a racial supremacy. If we go to the Talmud, Bava Metzia 114b, we read, "Jewish people are called man, but Gentiles, meaning non-Jews, are not called man." So this is a racial distinction between Jews and non-Jews. When we go to the Jerusalem Talmud, in the Kiddushin, it says, "Kill the best of Gentiles, smash the head of the best of snakes." So non-Jews are compared to snakes, vile creatures that should be killed. When we look into the specifics of Talmudic purity laws, so for Muslims we have the laws of tahara, purity, making wudu, making ghusl, washing, what kind of waters can be used. Well, in Judaism, there's also a vast literature on taharat, or tahara in Arabic, meaning purity. And in those examples, you find many of the application of this idea that Jews are the only real humans, non-Jews are not human. So here we read in the Bava Metzia, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, the graves of Gentiles do not render one impure, as it stated, and you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, are man, which teaches that you, i.e. the Jewish people, are called man, but Gentiles are not called man. So there's a rule within the Talmud that if you are in the graveyard of men, then that you become impure because of that. So the question arises, what if you go into the graveyard of non-Jews? Do you become impure, ritually impure, by going to the graveyard of non-Jews? And the answer is no, because they're not really men. These are not the dead bodies of men. These are the dead bodies of non-men, or even animals. And the comparison is made to animals throughout the Talmud. So when people see these verses, or rather these passages of the Talmud is one of the most important religious scriptures within Judaism. But modern Jews are very embarrassed by these kinds of passages that compare non-Jews to animals or to snakes. So they have apologetics, and they say, here's an example tweet, that the Talmud isn't the word of God, that's the Torah, meaning the Hebrew Bible. The Talmud is meant to be debated. It's merely interpretations by men, not God. But this is false. The Talmud is considered the oral Torah that was revealed to Moses at the same time that the written Torah was revealed. So the Talmud is based on the oral Torah, which they consider to be the revelation of God. The rabbis in the Talmud are believed to also speak on the basis of supernatural knowledge transmitted to them from Moses. So when the rabbis are debating in the Talmud, this is not just some random rabbi who's giving his opinion. In the Talmud, this is actually believed to be representing the speech of God as has come to Moses, as has come to the rabbis. So just like in Islam, we have the concept of isnad or sanad, that there's a chain of transmission. Jews believe that as well, religious Jews, when it comes to the Talmud, that this has been transmitted from rabbi to rabbi over thousands of years. Of course, Muslims do have like a record of the actual transmission. There's not a robust record of sanad, so to speak, within the Jewish tradition, but that's at least the claim. Talmudic rabbis are also sometimes known to hear the voice from heaven, bat kol, what's called the bat kol. So this is also represented in the Talmud. It's not just the random opinions of men. Rabbis also can get knowledge by ascending to heaven. So when the claim is made that the Talmud is man-made, in the sense that it is written by rabbis, or it's the recorded opinions of rabbis, yes, that's true in a sense, but the Jewish belief is that the voice of the rabbis and the opinion of the rabbis are more authoritative than the voice of God himself. The voice of the rabbis are actually more authoritative than the voice of God. And this is the doctrine of the Torah is not in heaven. And it's also related in the Talmud, in the story of Oven of Achnai. And for lack of time, we won't be able to go through all the details of that. But this is similar to what Islam and what the Quran notes about Judaism. And in the Quran we read, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They've taken their rabbis and their monks as lords besides Allah. And this is actually in the religion. This is actually within Judaism, that the opinion of rabbis are considered to be more authoritative than even the word of God. So arguably, the Talmud is more important as a religious text than the Torah itself. Even if we weren't looking at the Talmud, we have other authoritative religious texts that we can look at, which are, for example, the Mishnah Torah of Maimonides. Maimonides is considered to be the greatest scholar, legal scholar of the Talmud, or the Torah rather. And he is considered the greatest rabbi, basically, in terms of theological and legal reasoning. And this is what Maimonides says. Now, try to understand this passage. I'll try to explain it, but he says in the Mishnah Torah, if a Jewish male enters into relations with a Gentile woman, when he does so intentionally, she should be executed. She is executed because she caused a Jew to be involved in an unseemly transgression, as is the law with regard to an animal. So basically, the law with regard to an animal within Judaism is that the animal, if there's an act of bestiality, when a man has some kind of sexual relation with an animal, the animal is killed. So the relation between a Jewish male and a non-Jewish female is analogous. According to Maimonides, the female, meaning the woman, should be executed. And then he says, what's even more shocking than that? This applies regardless of whether the Gentile woman was a minor of 3 years of age or an adult, whether she was single or married, and it applies even if the Jew was a minor of 9 years old. She is executed. So even a 3-year-old is raped, that 3-year-old should be put to death because this is basically analogous to bestiality. Now, Maimonides has written this. Obviously, I know that most Jews today would completely denounce the idea here, but I don't hear much denunciation of Maimonides. I don't hear much denunciation of Maimonides, and when I presented this passage in a debate context, and I've asked it for my interlocutor to denounce the passage, they've refused. They've refused to denounce Maimonides. Why? Because Maimonides is the greatest legal scholar of the Torah. If you denounce Maimonides, you basically denounce the entire rabbinic Jewish tradition. So, but this passage is there, and you can, if you want to get the exact website on the Jewish yeshiva source for this passage, I'll be happy to provide that as well. So what about racism? We see this concept of racial supremacy, how non-Jews are not considered to even be human, but what about just racism? We see anti-black racism within the Jewish scriptures. So Jewish scriptures denigrate all non-Jews as subhuman, but they single out blacks for special insult, and they use the word kushi. Anti-black racism is clearly expressed in the Talmud. One key passage explains that Noah's son Ham committed a sin on the ark, and for this reason, him and his descendants are cursed with having black skin. This is known as the curse of Ham. All blacks are considered to be descendants of this son of Noah, who was named Ham. So in the Sanhedrin 108b in the Talmud, the sages taught 3 violated that directive and engaged in intercourse while on the ark, and all of them were punished for doing so. They are the dog and the raven and Ham, son of Noah. The dog was punished in that it's bound. The raven was punished in that it spits. And Ham was afflicted in that his skin turned black. This is the punishment for his violation of Noah's ark. Other classical Jewish texts offer further details. It's asserted that blacks are descended from Canaan and the son Ham. And there are many curses associated with being part of this lineage. Black skin, being ugly, you're meant to serve as slaves for other people. These are all found within the Talmud and other midrash, which are authoritative Jewish texts. It's also claimed that the lineage of blacks is associated with bestiality and they have sex with dogs. So within the Talmud we read, concerning the Kushi, the Gihor, the Lavkan, the Kapei, the dwarf, the deaf-mute, the imbecile, the drunk, and those with ritually pure marks, their conditions disqualify them from performing temple service. So not only are they cursed with ugliness and black skin, but they also cannot serve in certain roles within Jewish ritual. This is coming straight from the Talmud. You also find this racism expressed by modern rabbis. So there's a huge controversy because it came on record that the chief rabbi of Israel was calling African Americans monkeys. So this is not just some random rabbi fringe element. This is the chief rabbi of Israel, and there was a huge controversy when this came out. There was also a huge controversy when it was discovered that Ethiopian women in Israel were being given contraceptive without consent. So you have Ethiopian women, black women coming from Ethiopia that are trying to resettle in Israel, and they're Jewish as well. They're Jewish Ethiopian women and families, and the Israeli Health Ministry was giving them these jabs, which was sterilizing them, basically sterilizing these Ethiopian women. And it wasn't discovered that this was happening until outside groups and social workers discovered that the birth rate for Ethiopian immigrants were cut in half over a decade. And there was an Israeli documentary that was presenting all this, and it caused a huge popular outcry. So imagine that. You have forced sterilization for blacks in Israel. The Israeli health ministry is behind it. And we are supposed to consider Israel to be the only democracy in the Middle East. But the racism found within Jewish texts are not just directed against blacks. There's also anti-Arab racism. So in the Talmud we read, the sages in the school of Rav say there are 4 creations that the Holy One, blessed be he, created, yet as it were, he regrets that he created them, as they do more harm than good. And these are exile, Chaldeans, Ishmaelites, and the evil inclination. So these are 4 creations of God, but God regrets them because they do more harm than good. So the Ishmaelites, who are the Ishmaelites? Ishmaelites, as it's written, the tents of robbers prosper, and they that provoke God are secure in whatsoever God brings with his hand. God brought upon himself these Arabs that dwell in the deserts in tents. So this is how Ishmaelites are defined in the Talmud. So I'm getting the indication that we have to take a break to pray for Maghrib. Let me just finish this section and then we'll go. We also see in another book or tractate in the Talmud, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to Levi, show me Persians, meaning describe a typical Persian to me. Levi said to him, they're similar to the legions of the house of David. Rabbi Yehuda said, show me Habbarim, Persian priests. Levi said to him, they're similar to angels of destruction. Rabbi Yehuda said, show me Ishmaelites, meaning Arabs. Levi said to him, they're similar to demons of an outhouse. Rabbi Yehuda said, show me Torah scholars of Babylonia. Levi said to him, they're similar to ministering angels. So there's kind of like a racial hierarchy here. Jews are at the top. Then Persians. Persians are like bad angels. And then you have the Ishmaelites, and they're demons. The Arabs, they're at the bottom of the totem pole. And maybe blacks are below that. So this is the racial hierarchy presented within this passage of the Talmud. And again, we see this is not, so you might say that, oh, Daniel is just reading these passages out of context. He's just cherry picking these things to give Judaism a bad name. But no Jew actually believes in these kinds of things. But again, you see very authoritative Jewish rabbis, teachers who are teaching at some of the highest yeshivas, meaning religious schools within Israel, who are repeating these ideas. And there is a big controversy at one particular school known as B'nai David. B'nai David is a yeshiva. Basically, it's like a finishing school. After Israeli high school students graduate, they go to these academies in preparation for their mandatory service in the IDF. And these academies have religious instruction. And some of the audio from one of the top academies, B'nai David, was leaked. And you have all of these despicable racist statements coming from these teachers. And again, B'nai David, to give you a sense of the significance, just in January, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, was giving speeches at B'nai David. He gives speeches at this school, and the teachers at this school are teaching things like the following. They're praising Hitler. They're urging enslavement of non-Jews. So one of the teachers there, Rabbi Eliezer Keshtiel, says, the Gentiles will want to be our slaves. Being a slave to a Jew is the best. They're glad to be slaves. They want to be slaves. Instead of just walking the streets and being stupid and violent and harming each other, once they're slaves, their lives can begin to take shape. All around us, we're surrounded by peoples with genetic problems. Ask a simple Arab, where do you want to be? He wants to be under the occupation. Why? Because they have genetic problems. They don't know how to run a country. They don't know how to do anything. Look at them. And then to clarify, just in case you were confused if that was racist enough, he says that yes, we're racists. We believe in racism. There are races in the world and people have genetic traits, and that requires us to try to help them. The Jews are a more successful race. So again, this is not some random nobody saying this. This is one of the rabbi instructors at a top academy within Israel. And this is the type of hate that is being taught. So when you see a Israeli soldier, IDF, playing with children's dolls of Palestinians that they just got finished massacring, that doesn't happen overnight. That is through socialization. That is through a long process of indoctrination, imbibing that hate against non-Jews. And again, and it's not only these random rabbis in Israel. You also have major Jewish Zionist figures like Ben Shapiro who echo these very same sentiments. When Ben Shapiro tweets that Israelis build, but Arabs blow stuff up and live in their own sewage, when he tweets that to the world, he has no shame. Like, what makes him even think in such a racial way, in such a racist way, to denigrate Arabs, 500 million people in the entire world, as being just violent, irrational terrorists who blow things up and live in sewage like rats? How does that occur to Ben Shapiro, who's supposed to be such a shining example of Jewish intellectual sophistication? This is shocking. It should be shocking, but unfortunately, these issues are not openly discussed. And the thing about this type of racism is that it affects the entire culture. It doesn't just stay within the yeshivas and stay within the synagogues. The scripture affects the Jewish tradition and therefore affects Jewish culture. Therefore, you see non-religious Jews who will say, I'm not committed to the Talmud, I'm not a Torah-abiding Jew, still will express extreme racism. And there is an example of an Israeli lawmaker who proclaims the supremacy of the Jewish race. Jews just have higher IQ. Jews are just more successful. We are in this position to occupy and to control Arabs because they are inferior. And he's not you can tell he's not an Orthodox Jew. The semi-divinity of Jews. So this is something that is also very important. I recommend reading this article. You can find it online. The differences between the Jews and the Gentiles in the Agadah, the Kabbalah, and in Jewish thought. You can also read the book, an academic book titled Jewish Fundamentalism in Israel by Israel Shahak and Norton Mesvinsky. And this is a book that discusses the views of a very influential rabbi, Menachem Schneerson, who died in 1994 and is considered the most influential, one of the most influential, if not the most influential Jewish religious figure in the 20th century. So Rabbi Schneerson, here he is. Here's a picture of him. And he's very significant, especially here in Queens. His grave is, just around the corner in Cambria Heights. And many Jews consider it to be a pilgrimage site. They come to see his grave site. But what did he think about Jews versus non-Jews? This is, quite interesting stuff. He says the difference between a Jewish and a non-Jewish person stems from the common expression, let us differentiate. We have a case of let us differentiate between totally different species. This is what needs to be said about the body. The body of a Jewish person is of a totally different quality from the body of members of all nations of the world. The Jewish body looks as if it were in substance similar to bodies of non-Jews. The bodies look similar, but only seem to be similar in material substance, outward look, and superficial quality. The difference of the inner quality, however, is so great that the bodies should be considered as completely different species. Two contrary types of soul exist. A non-Jewish soul comes from 3 satanic spheres, while the Jewish soul stems from holiness. Considering the general difference between Jews and non-Jews, a Jew was not created as a means for some other purpose. He himself is the purpose, since the substance of all divine emanations was created only to serve Jews. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, says Genesis. This means that the heavens and the earth were created for the sake of Jews, who are called the beginning. This means everything, all developments, all discoveries, the creation, including the heavens and the earth, are vanity compared to the Jews. The important thing are the Jews because they do not exist for any other aim. They themselves are the divine aim. So I don't think there's anything that can be more racist or ethnocentric than that. But this is, again, from one of the most significant Jewish religious figures of the 20th century, Rabbi Schneerson, whose students might be in the audience as we speak. So this is the worldview of Judaism. And again, I'll continue my presentation after the Maghrib prayer, but consider the whole purpose of this, that this kind of scrutiny has been on Islamic texts, on the Quran, on statements of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on hadith, on books of fiqh. This type of scrutiny, line by line, basically combing through the Islamic tradition to find anything that is controversial or sounds bad to a modern ear. They have highlighted this. Many Zionist groups have brought this to the fore. Why? To demonize Muslims, to make Muslims look like terrorists, to make Muslims look like violent, barbaric people in order to justify the invasion of Iraq, the invasion and continued occupation of Afghanistan, the continual blockade of Gazans in the Gaza Strip, the continued terroristic actions against Palestinians in the West Bank, the genocidal behavior of the IDF. All of these are justified by saying, oh, but look at what Islam teaches. They have jihad, in their religion. I'm perfectly happy. In fact, this is what I've been doing for over 10 years, to defend the teachings of Islam and say, yes, we have jihad in Islam, but what does it actually mean? What is jihad? Does it mean killing civilians? Does it mean, attacking women and children? No, that's not what it means. This is what jihad means, and here's the proof. And Muslims have that duty. Muslims have that duty to explain and clarify. But where is the counterpart? Where is the analysis? Where's the awareness of these texts in Judaism? Where do we see these passages being cited in the mainstream? I was in college when the beginning of the war on terror happened. Back in those days, you had Fox News and you had commentators like Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly could cite you verses of the Quran like that. He could say, oh, kill them wherever you find them. Isn't that what your holy book says? They can cite these kinds of passages completely divorced from context and completely butchered and misinterpreted. But they were at least aware of that, and they spread that awareness to millions of people through their very popular television programs. Where was the counterpart to that? Where were the Talmudic passages cited? Where was the Torah passages cited? We haven't had that. So we have a lot of catching up to do to spread awareness. And I know, I'm not going to do the same thing that the Zionists did to Muslims, because the Zionists didn't caveat anything. They didn't put a disclaimer and say that, no, Muslims are, denounce terrorism. Muslims are not terrorists. They didn't put those disclaimers. But at least I will say that I know that many Jews disagree with these passages, and they would condemn Maimonides, they would condemn the Talmud, no problem. And they also condemn the kind of racial supremacy and the culture that is imbued in these passages. So I'm not trying to paint all Jews with one brush, to say that all Jews endorse this kind of racism and racial superiority, because I know it's not true. There are many brave Jews actually right now who are fighting against the genocide of Palestinians. And I consider those Jews to be very brave because they're going against their own people. They're going against their own people for the sake of what's right, for the sake of justice. So I am very appreciative of those Jews. And I'm happy to name them people like Norman Finkelstein, people like Glenn Greenwald, people like Aaron Mattei, Max Blumenthal, who has done amazing reporting to debunk some of the atrocity propaganda and claims against Palestinians that we'll get into right after we finish our prayer, inshallah. So let's continue the presentation. So the things that the texts that I've cited, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I could have cited dozens more passages, and there's just not enough time to go through all of it. Maybe you should ask the college here to teach this kind of class and bring these kinds of texts up in class in the same way that they have classes that scrutinize Islam and bring Islamic texts. Also, I want to make it very clear that the things that I'm showing you and presenting to you, I make sure are very well represented within the Jewish tradition. So I do the academic background work, and the things I'm claiming, actually, a lot of them, it's not like I've read the Talmud cover to cover. It's other academic works that have cited these passages, except they've put it, buried on page 50 where no one's going to see it. I'm just bringing it out so that people can actually be more aware. So another category, other than racial supremacism, anti-Black and anti-Arab racism that we find in the Talmud, we also find these bizarre accounts of atrocities that are claimed Jews have suffered historically. And the question is, it's when you have a religion or a culture that tells you to hate others, it's usually not enough to inspire hate. If you just tell your children, oh, hate this group of people, it's usually not enough to inspire hate. You usually will have to put some kind of frame on that to say that, well, these people committed atrocities against us. These people in the past committed all kinds of atrocities, and we have to hate them in return. We have to hate them and take out our revenge in return. That's the sociology of hatred. And this is what we find also in the Jewish texts. It's not sufficient just to assert that other groups should be hated. There needs to be a reason for the hate. And Judaism teaches Jews that non-Jews have viciously persecuted and slaughtered Jews for no reason throughout history. Jews are commanded to remember these evil historical deeds done by non-Jews, and they are to regularly commemorate this through Jewish holidays like Purim and Hanukkah. This concept of remembering what has been done to you comes actually from the Bible. It comes from the Torah, what's known as Amalek or the Amalekites. And in Deuteronomy chapter 25, we read, remember what Amalek did to you, this people known as Amalek, on your journey out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary and struck down all who lagged behind you. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies on every hand in the land that your Lord God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. So Amalek is this group that is purported to have committed atrocities against the Jewish nation. And God is saying, do not forget what they've done, and you shall blot them out. Basically, you should genocide them, completely wipe them out. And other passages within Deuteronomy, Numbers, 1 Samuel also explain the nature of the genocide. Kill women, children, infants, even their livestock. So Amalek, the Mishnah Torah, which again is coming from Maimonides, the most authoritative legal scholar of Judaism, he says that in his passage that Jews are commanded to always remember the Amalekites as to preserve hatred of them in their hearts. So to quote, similarly, it is a positive commandment to destroy the memory of Amalek, as Deuteronomy chapter 25 states, obliterate their memory. It's also a positive commandment to constantly remember their evil deeds and their ambush of Israel, to arouse our hatred of them. So this is explicit. We want to arouse hatred. Remember what Amalek did to you. The oral tradition teaches, remember with your mouths, do not forget in your hearts, for it is forbidden to forget our hatred and enmity for them. Now, what is significant about this type of genocidal hatred towards Amalek is that Israeli politicians are constantly invoking Amalek, and they're constantly labeling the Palestinians as Amalek. And even Netanyahu in the course of this war has on a couple of occasions referred to the Palestinians as Amalek. Remember what Amalek has done to you. And many other Israeli politicians have cited this as well. And that's why in the International Court of Justice, the lawyers who were claiming that Israel is committing a genocide cited dozens of Israeli lawmakers and politicians who are calling Palestinians Amalek. They're using this term specifically, deliberately, to invoke hatred, to arouse hatred, genocidal hatred and bloodlust against the Palestinians. So then what do we read in the Talmud? So this idea that we have suffered these atrocities and therefore we're justified in our hate and we're justified in genocidal violence in retaliation, even though Palestinians have nothing to do with this Amalek that the Bible mentions from thousands of years ago. What's the connection? But within the Jewish tradition, people who are the enemies of Jews are labeled as Amalek, and they deserve the same kind of hatred and the same kind of genocidal treatment, killing of men, women, and children, and infants. So then in the Talmud, along this same theme of atrocity propaganda, it reads, with regard to the Babylonian exile following the destruction of the first temple, an old man from among the inhabitants of Jerusalem related to me, in this valley that lies before you, Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, killed 211,000 people, and in Jerusalem itself he killed 94,000 people on one stone until the blood of his victims flowed and touched the blood of Zechariah, etc. So on one stone, 94,000 people killed. Does that match with the demographics of Jerusalem at that time? God knows best. Seems to stretch our credibility. But then we read more. Apropos its discussion of the destruction of the temple and the calamities that befell Israel, the Gemara cites the verse, the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau, which the sages expounded as follows. The voice, this is the cry stirred up by the Emperor Hadrian, who caused the Jewish people to cry out when he killed 600,000 on 600,000 in Alexandria of Egypt. So are these numbers accurate? Is this a major exaggeration? Then in another passage of Gittin in the Talmud, the voice of Jacob, this is the cry aroused by the Emperor Vespasian, who killed 4 million people in the city of Beitar, and some say he killed 40 million people. So 40 million people, 40 million Jews are being killed by, in one city basically, by Vespasian. Is this true? But that we're just getting started. There were 400 synagogues in the city of Beitar, and in each and every one of them were 400 school teachers, and each and every one of these teachers had 400 school children, and when the enemy entered there, these school children stabbed them with their pens, and when the enemy prevailed and caught them, they wrapped the children in their scrolls and lit them on fire. So how many school children is this? Well, there's 400 synagogues with each one having 400 school teachers and each of the teachers having 400 school children. So that's 64 million school children being claimed were wrapped in scrolls and lit on fire. So this is like, a genocide that the world has never seen. It's basically more people than were in that part of the world in total. But this is the kind of horrific atrocity that the Talmud claims has happened to the Jews. And if you teach this to your population, to your society, to your children, you have them learn these passages, you're teaching them in your yeshivas, then you get this kind of mindset that the world is out to kill us, the world is out to genocide us, and we're justified in perpetrating all kinds of war crimes and atrocities on others. So within this recent conflict, we've seen this kind of atrocity propaganda, just exaggerated claims that have no basis in reality. The claim that we heard in October was that Hamas has beheaded 40 babies. They're so brutal and terroristic that they have no mercy even for Jewish babies. They beheaded 40 of them. This was the claim that reached the President of the United States. But it's come out and it's been definitively proven as to be completely false, a fabrication, something that was just invented for the purpose of demonizing Palestinians and justifying the brutal carpet bombing of Gaza. The other claim, Hamas has weaponized sexual assault and engaged in mass rape. There's mass rape against Israelis by the Palestinian terrorists. This was the claim. Mass rape. Reality? False. It's been completely debunked as a hoax. Completely debunked, and we'll get into the details of that. Hamas stabbed pregnant women, murdered babies in the womb. This is the claim. Again, completely false. There's no record, and the Israeli Ministry of Health and other authorities within Israel, they have not confirmed any pregnant woman was killed on October 7th. So this is completely made up. No pregnant women were killed in the Nova Music Festival, and no pregnant woman was killed in any of the kibbutzim. So this was complete, even though it was blasted on all the headlines, it was repeated by all of the talking heads on social media and on TV, but it turned out to be propaganda, just to incite hatred of Palestinians. So the New York Post, advertising, Hamas kills 40 babies and children, beheading them, look at these monsters. But it was debunked. Joe Biden keeps repeating his false claim that he saw pictures of beheaded babies. So the president of the United States is saying, oh yeah, I saw these pictures. Say, what pictures? There are no pictures. There's no pictures of this. There are no reports of this. It is completely fabricated. Completely fabricated by Israel and its foreign ministry. Israel's assault forced a nurse to leave babies behind. They were found decomposing. So when we see these we hear about Palestinians committing atrocities against Israelis, the reality often is that those same atrocities are really being committed by the IDF or by Israel against Palestinians. How many Palestinian babies have been killed, murdered, because Israel is bombing hospitals? Israel is cutting the power to Gaza, cutting the power to hospitals, even bombing their generators so they can't have backup electricity. These were premature babies in the nursery who had to be abandoned because the IDF was bombing the hospital. So they're in the crib, babies decomposing. Can you imagine the horror? This is the worst kind of nightmare that Israel is afflicting on the world, on Palestinians. So how about this claim of mass rape? There was a big report in the New York Times, Screams Without Words was the title of it. And it described how Hamas weaponized sexual assault. Since that was published, and basically it created this wave of genocidal hatred amongst Jews, not only in Israel, but in the West, the story has been completely debunked. It's been completely debunked as being atrocity propaganda. And The Intercept, just today, a major investigative journalistic outlet, published its critique of the New York Times and said, this is major journalistic malpractice. This is completely unacceptable, and multiple standards of the New York Times itself has been violated in publishing this essentially propaganda. So it's been completely debunked. And what The Intercept did was it took interviews from the main writer of this article, the reporter, Annette Schwartz. Annette Schwartz, it turns out, is not a journalist. She's connected to Israeli intelligence, and her main line of work is propaganda. She's not a reporter, so how's the New York Times bringing her to lead this investigation of Hamas mass rape? This doesn't seem unbiased, so that's one violation of journalistic credibility. Then this Annette Schwartz is going on podcasts in Israel, talking in Hebrew about her investigation. And so what The Intercept did is it translated her discussions. And in her discussions, she admits that I went to all of these rape clinics. I went to the health ministry and I asked, where are the reports of the rapes that happened on October 7th? And all of these clinics told me there were no rapes. We have no record of that. There's no one who came to us and claimed that they were raped. So The Intercept quotes her, first thing I called them all of these facilities, 11 Israeli hospitals that examine and treat potential victims of sexual violence, including rape, and they told me no complaint of sexual assault was received. I had a lot of interviews which didn't lead anywhere. I would go to all kinds of psychiatric hospitals, sit in front of the staff, all of them are fully committed to the mission, and no one had met a victim of sexual assault. She admits this in Hebrew in these interviews in Israel, but to an American audience in English, the New York Times is publishing her report that there was mass rape. So what is the evidence? What is the evidence of this mass rape? It does not exist. It's just based on literally 2 quote-unquote eyewitness reports. And the only forensic evidence that they had was there was a lady at the Nova Festival, music festival, whose body was found and she wasn't wearing underwear. They claimed that this means she was raped. That's the only forensic evidence that there is. And her relatives, the relatives of this woman, and even her husband questioned the New York Times and questioned the report and say, we were manipulated. We don't believe she was raped. We, the family, don't believe she was raped. We were manipulated by the New York Times to make it seem like we agree with this narrative. And they've come out and publicly said this as well. So the whole thing is a fabrication. And she goes on, and I won't go through all of it with you. So even the Times of Israel reported this about a month within the war and admitted that there's no evidence of rape. Amid war and urgent need to ID bodies, evidence of Hamas's October 7 rapes slips away. Oh, it slipped away, the evidence. Despite definitive witness testimony, okay, they say definitive, global skepticism persists about the terrorist sexual crimes. Times of Israel investigates how a mass casualty event in a war zone made forensic determination impossible. So saying it's impossible, we can't have any evidence of this mass rape. Hamas engaged in mass rapes. And there's global skepticism. Wait, how is Hamas engaging in mass rape when they're also trying to kill everyone, but they're also trying to take hostages, and the IDF is firing Hellfire missiles from the Apache helicopters that are raining down on them, and the tanks are firing at the kibbutzim? Like, how are these rapes happening exactly? Show us the timeline, show us evidence. It doesn't really make sense. So the entire mass rape story has completely fallen apart and been debunked. And then similarly, there's these accusations that are made against Palestinians, but the truth is that the IDF has been raping, Israel has been raping not only other IDF soldiers, but also Palestinians. And here is just a small sample of headlines of the soldier kills herself after reporting she was raped. Now Israeli Army probes suspicions of negligence. Female IDF soldiers were pimped out to terror inmates. IDF officer charged with sexual assault of 3 female subordinates. 3 Israeli soldiers charged with raping, sodomizing female comrade. Israeli soldiers accused of raping 11-year-old. IDF colonel rabbi implies that rape is permitted in war. Many statements coming from rabbis that rape is permitted in war. And these rabbis aren't just making stuff up. This is found within the legal text of Judaism. I didn't go into that for this presentation, but you look at the Mishnah Torah again from Maimonides. He says, yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly allowed for a soldier when you're fighting Amalek to rape a woman or a girl, and then when you're done, just kill her. There's no problem with that. That's allowed according to Jewish law. IDF soldiers rape in prison, only tip of iceberg, says state comptroller. Israeli suspects to plead to charges of raping of a British woman after defense lawyers get involved. 17 soldiers investigating rape case. Israeli guards rape Palestinian women, on and on and on. Deceased Israeli soldier had boasted about raping Palestinian women. Some of these TikToks are up. Like I've published on my channel. Israeli soldiers currently bragging about raping Palestinian girls. There's one soldier saying, oh yeah, 14-year-old, we're just looking for little girls to rape. So that's the presentation. And, it's right now we're at a crucial moment where decades of Hasbara, Israeli propaganda, are being blown out of the water, basically, as complete lies, complete propaganda. And we have to seize of this moment to question and to look deeper into these texts. What does Judaism actually teach? And I think it is necessary for Jews who do not agree with this racism, they do not agree with this racial supremacy, to be honest and to hold your institutions accountable, hold your rabbis accountable. How is this acceptable? How can you not denounce this? This is radicalism, this is endorsement of terrorism, this is endorsement of rape. There needs to be that kind of accountability. And for the rest of us, we have to keep pointing out these passages within the Jewish religious text, because it's a critical component of the fight for Palestinians. A lot of the commentary that comes, people defending Palestine, criticizing the IDF and its genocide, that's all good. But where is the religious component? You have to tie it back to the religion, because that answers the question. It answers the question of why this kind of behavior we're seeing in 4K from Israelis, and it's being cheerleaded by Zionists throughout the world. What is the cause of that? And it comes from religious teachings that affect the culture, and the culture affects individual Jews. So this is a necessary conversation that has to happen. I hope that this has generated some thought for everyone, and I hope I can answer your questions, inshallah, in the Q&A. So I guess we can just make dua before we continue. And again, the whole speech was my thoughts, my own research. I don't speak for the MSA or the Muslim students on campus, and I definitely don't speak for the university, if anyone thought that I was speaking on behalf of the university. Again, I want to have a conversation. I originally wanted to have a conversation with Jews, could have had like an equal platform to discuss these passages, but they rejected it. They refused that. So that's unfortunate, but we can continue maybe in a discussion in the Q&A. Okay, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. So we're going to make a dua now. O Allah, we turn to you alone and beseech you alone, Ya Rabb. Aid the Palestinians and give them full victory. Forgive those who have died and elevate them to Jannat al-Firdaus, Ya Rabb. Forgive and elevate their families, Ya Rabb. Bring relief, bring comfort to the Palestinian children. Bring relief, bring comfort to the Palestinian mothers, the Palestinian fathers, Ya Rabb. Bring them relief, bring them comfort. Protect them from every harm and from every evil, Ya Rabb. Eradicate the starvation of the Palestinians and all oppressed people around the world, Ya Rabb. Protect all the children around the world, Ya Rabb. Protect them from genocide, Ya Rabb. Protect them from bombing. Protect them from bullets. Protect them from starvation. Protect them from every harm, Ya Rabb. Protect their mothers. Protect their fathers. Protect their family, Ya Rabb. We call on you alone, without partner, Ya Allah. Wrap them in your mercy. Wrap them in your love, Ya Rabb. Destroy the occupation, Ya Rabb. Destroy the oppressors, Ya Rabb. Destroy those perpetrating genocide, Ya Rabb. Destroy the genocide apologists, Ya Rabb. Destroy the genocide enablers. Destroy and punish those who are cheering and laughing about starving Palestinian children, Ya Rabb. Punish them in the deepest parts of your eternal fire, Ya Rabb. Protect us from the evil plots of your enemies, Ya Rabb. Protect us from the evil plots of your enemies, Ya Rabb, and turn their plots against them. Give us the strength to stand for justice, Ya Rabb, to fight against dhulm and oppression, Ya Rabb. Give us the tawfiq to defend the deen and to establish this deen firmly on earth, Ya Rabb. Forgive us our shortcomings, forgive us our shortcomings, forgive us, Ya Rabb, and guide us to the straight path. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
So my comment is also the Israeli army have been caught doing something called the Hannibal Directive. If anyone knows what that is, basically to prevent the Palestinian military from doing a prisoner exchange. They kill their own people. I don't know why, maybe because they suck at aiming, whatever the situation is. So there won't be a prisoner exchange. And also, Israel killed their own hostages in Gaza, and they're blaming it on the Palestinians, and there's a lot of pressure from the Israeli public to do a prisoner exchange. And this isn't the first time we're seeing this propaganda. We saw this in 1948 with the genocide in the Nakba, in 1967, so on and so forth, where the Israeli military, they get away with crimes. And this is the first time in 2024, because we have cameras, because of TikTok, that they're getting exposed. So my question to you is the following. People call the Palestinians terrorists, and they say, we just want to kill Jews, just wake up one day and want to kill Jews. the world has tried to hold Israel accountable. Do you think the only way to hold Israel accountable, and I say this with no shame, is if the Palestinian military or if the Muslim world gives a military defeat to Israel? Because Israel, the ICJ, we tried that, did not work. The boycotting is barely working. They're still doing the genocide. So do you think the only way is through military means? Because that's the only way Israel learns.
The way that the United States has tried to pressure states to obey international law, quote unquote, is applied selectively. They have different methods. They have a carrot and a stick. The carrot is you offer money, you bribe officials, you offer IMF loans, and that way you try to get foreign countries to obey the law, basically, or obey your will, or to follow your interests. That's the carrot. The stick is you put sanctions, you get the UN involved for a coalition to invade, you get NATO to involved to bomb. This is how the US has kept the entire world in submission for decades now, for over a century, you could even say. Definitely since World War II. So Israel has flouted all international law. They have flouted all standards of basic human decency. They have committed war crime after war crime shamelessly. They don't respond to any kind of sanction if other countries put sanctions, like taking out their diplomatic relations, etc. So if it comes to war, like this is something that maybe is the only thing that Israel is going to understand. If surrounding countries, if they wake up one day and they realize that Israel's plan is not just to wipe out Palestinians, they have other regional interests when it comes to the Golan Heights, for example, when it comes to the Sinai Peninsula, when it comes to other areas of the Middle East. If there needs to be a military intervention, then inshallah that will happen. That's what we want. That's, to make it very clear, that's what we want. You have to give the mic. And I don't know how sisters are.
One there, one here.
Yeah, so sisters, if you have a question, is there a mic? Yeah.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much. I was expecting to be shocked, appalled, and disappointed, and I wasn't. So I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate the documentation. I learned a lot that I didn't know. It was kind of, I'll have to do some soul searching. So I very much appreciate that, in this world where there are no more facts, at least we can agree on the facts here. So I appreciate that. I checked all the references while you were talking, and yes, they're there. So I wanted to thank you for that, for sticking to the facts, for opening my eyes to this side of things that I didn't see. Here's my question. So you mentioned very nicely that there were no mass rapes, and that's true. I mean, I think I've seen that also, some publications about that there is at least a question mark. My question is, do you acknowledge that there were killings by Hamas on October 7? What is your take on October 7? So I know you're focusing on the other side, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say about October 7. What is your, what are the facts as far as you're concerned with regards to killings, not rapes, but killings?
Thank you for your question. I didn't really clarify in my presentation the exact facts and background of October 7th. October 7th was a reaction. October 7th was Palestinians realizing that the noose is tightening around their necks, basically. Since 2007, Israel has blockaded the Gaza Strip, which means that they control anyone who comes in and out of the Gaza Strip. They control all the aid, the medicine, the food, the water, the electricity that gets into the Gaza Strip. And they've slowly been basically tightening the noose, reducing the amount of food and aid and medicine that goes into the Gaza Strip, the amount of electricity, even clean drinking water was not available to 97% of the Gaza Strip, and 50% of the population in Gaza is under 18 years old. So we're talking about minors and children. So they are being basically starved to death, and the time is ticking down because of Saudi Arabia. Why? Because Saudi Arabia is about to normalize with Israel. And none of that normalization involves putting pressure on Israel to give Palestinians a state or to guarantee that Palestinians have basic rights. So the Palestinians calculated, and this is my, I don't have any insider information. This is just what I'm gathering from all the facts that I've read. The Palestinians decided that now is the time to act, now or never. We have to break out of this concentration camp, and we have to secure some kind of leverage, because we have zero leverage. The international community has turned their back on us. They tried peaceful protest in 2019, protesting at the border. Basically, Israel created this 20-foot wall to keep them in their cage, the concentration camp. They protested that peacefully. IDF snipers at the wall sniped and killed over 200 Palestinians protesting. This is the shocking brutality. So they've tried peaceful protest, they've tried all kinds of international pressure, they're being starved to death. So they break out, their plan is to take hostages as leverage so that they can gain some kind of semblance of a future and not be ethnically cleansed or genocided. That was the plan. Obviously there was a killing that was done, but it's killing in context of war, two sides of a war. And no one disagrees that people get killed in war. The casualty numbers shifted quite a bit in October 7th and the weeks thereafter. And they started out with the claim that 1,400 Israelis were murdered by Hamas. But that figure changed. It went to 1,200. Some estimates are even lower of the total casualty count. And the forensic evidence actually showed that Israel had targeted its own civilians in the Nova Music Festival. And this international groups have called this out. Witnesses, participants of the Nova Music Festival and at the kibbutzim also said that there was Israeli tanks and Israeli helicopters that were firing on the attendees of the music festival running away. And Israel announced that it was bearing all the evidence. So you have these images of cars that have been completely charred to a crisp. And people were pointing out that, well, none of the weapons that the Palestinians had could cause this kind of damage, this mass destruction. This is the damage done by, highly explosive Hellfire missiles. And witnesses are seeing these helicopters launching at the civilians. And reports came officially from the IDF that, yes, we did fire towards civilians. So how many of the total death count was from Palestinian fighters, like basically carrying AK-47s, and how much of that casualty count was from the IDF itself? I submit that a large percentage was from the IDF. It doesn't make sense for the Hamas operation to just kill as many people as possible if your goal is to take as many hostages as possible. Doesn't make sense to have both of those goals. So I think that's the reality. Now, if Hamas did kill women and children, I can completely condemn that. If they did that, but when you ask or you see, the reports from Hamas themselves, they make clear what their objectives were. Their objectives were to take hostages. They didn't have this directive, or they didn't tell soldiers like the Qassam Brigade or the Quds Brigade to kill civilians. That wasn't an order that they made, or to rape, or to engage in this kind of mass rape operation. So, but if people get killed, innocent civilians can get killed in war. So if that was deliberately done, all Muslims would condemn that. That's one of the atrocities of war in general. But the overall context of October 7th is prisoners escaping from a concentration camp.
Can I follow up really quick? Just
Sure.
Okay. So you mentioned war, but to me, so I'm totally eager what you're going to say, but to me it looks like an attack on civilians, right? Can we call, especially, I'm sure you know this, but those particular civilians were peace activists. It's very regrettable, right, that it happened there. They were people who would help bring Palestinians to hospitals, right, to Israeli hospitals. So it's very sad to me that this particular population, right, was. So I wonder if you can call it war when it was not army against army. So I'm curious, right? I guess we would need to define war, but it was really an attack against civilians. My second point is, I heard what you were saying before on YouTube, so I tried to research it. So indeed, you're right. There was a tank, an Israeli tank, that came to the kibbutz and fired on a house that was full of hostages, right? So that's actually verified by Haaretz, the newspaper which you know.
Well, is this in Gaza or in
No, in the kibbutz. So that is true, right? I verified that. Where I have a question is the Nova Festival, that there was a firing from above, from a helicopter, and I checked that on the internet, and I saw a report by France 24, France 24, this is the French channel, where they show that actually this was old footage from some other, check it, I mean, I'm inviting you to check France 24, France 24 reporting on that, because apparently
no, my source is Ynet.
What?
Ynet.
How do you, yeah, exactly.
It's like
Ynet. Yeah, and I looked
this
at
Israeli
that.
source.
And
Israeli
it's not
source.
based on a video, it's based on eyewitnesses and,
will
what the
check.
IDF said, yeah.
Oh,
Check
I will
that
check.
because that's also coming from well-documented sources,
Gotcha.
not a mistaken video. Yeah.
So just the war thing then, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I think that they were trying to take prisoners of war. Sometimes civilians, unfortunately, get caught in the crossfire. But Hamas, I'm just speaking very objectively. I'm not an advocate of Hamas. It's actually illegal in the United States because they're a designated terrorist organization. So I'm not advocating Hamas, but we're just talking about facts and what does Hamas actually claim. Hamas claims in their official charter, that's often cited, that they have no problem with the general body of Jews or the general population of Jews. They actually do not have any desire, definitely since 2000, the year 2000, to actually target any kind of Jewish civilian. Their operation was to take prisoners of war as leverage against Israel's increasing aggression and their eventual genocide. So, again, that's the nature of the situation, given that they're in a concentration camp and they don't have jets, they don't have the resources that Israel has to selectively target one group or another. I think that they minimized the hostages that they took or the prisoners of war that they took. All indications from the released prisoners was that they're treated well, that they were actually treated well. They're giving their captors high fives and fist bumps, and they're released. The hostages that don't get released, well, many of them were killed by the IDF itself. Even sometimes when they're waving white flags and they're still getting sniped. These are like red-headed Israelis. I don't know how they're being mistaken for Hamas. So but the brother in his earlier question mentioned the Hannibal Directive. And this is the policy of Israel. Like, they don't want to negotiate with terrorists. So if there's a hostage that's being taken or a prisoner of war, it's just more strategic to eliminate the hostage yourself. That's the Hannibal Directive, and this is well documented that the IDF was using the Hannibal Directive. You can check this on Ynet, on that Israeli site. The Hannibal Directive was in operation on October 7th. Where's the mic? Oh, here. Just give it to, with glasses.
Hi, thank you for coming, Haqiqatjou. My name is Dave. I'm Jewish, I'm queer, and I'm pro-Palestine. And on that issue, I'm glad we have solidarity because this must stop. There must be a ceasefire. There must be an end to the brutality that's happening to the Palestinian people. I would also like to say thank you for this statement you made online a few days ago, proclaiming that hatred of the Jewish race is not allowed within Islam. Thank you for that. That does lower some of the tension that comes from events like this due to some things that you've said. However, I don't believe this is enough. I think there are some things that you've said that are irresponsible in relation to this event as well as period about the Jewish people. When it comes to this event, the specific thing you said in relation to what happened last week, the threat that was made last week, insinuating that it was, as you said, quote unquote, the world's biggest hoaxers instead of the Muslim, which I agree with. I agree that it was not Muslims because the statement does not make sense from a Muslim because it was butchered Arabic. It was, hopefully God is great. That's a blasphemous statement. But the fact that you made it the statement of, it was instead another group known as the world's biggest hoaxers, you can claim that that wasn't meant towards Jew. What? Oh, sorry, I thought it was cut off. You can claim that it wasn't meant towards Jewish people. Even if I were to trust you on that statement, your audience got the message that it was. There were images of the happy merchant dressed as in like an ISIS soldier, and it's obvious that that is the message that they received. And aside from that, you've also made statements claiming that Jewish people have been oppressors for 3 centuries, which, and it wasn't just within Palestine. I can bring up the tweet if you'd like. It mentioned North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And Russia, thank you very much. And you can get into the weeds on what you meant by that, but it is in line with certain things you've said that diminish the history of oppression that Jews have faced. That, of course, doesn't excuse what is happening to the Palestinian people. The question I have that relates to all this and your ideology stems from one other thing you do, which is often sarcastically downplay the Holocaust in certain statements you've made. The 2 specific examples I have are one instance where it was talking about the UAE educating people about the Holocaust, in which you made the joke within it, and you can bring more context to the tweet. I'm already long-winded and I apologize. That it would hopefully, like sarcastically, you're saying this almost as if you were like an Israel spokesperson, hopefully will lead to little Arab girls be named Anne Frank instead of Fatima. And another instance, you spoke of 50% of young adults declining to affirm the belief the Holocaust happened, and 20% believing that the Holocaust was a myth. And then afterwards following with one of the greatest benefits of homeschooling is that your children won't be indoctrinated with ridiculous hoaxes about history that public schools peddle. My question is, if you feel that it's important to illuminate the truth of Jewish history, good, bad, flattering, unflattering, as you say in your statements in regards to the Talmud and other Jewish religious texts, why do you bemoan an education about the Holocaust, or at least, at the very least, insinuate either its exaggeration, its lack of importance, role and erosion of other cultures like you did with the UAE? Is it because you, it's either you do believe it exists and therefore it should be part of the truth-telling that you talk about, or you believe either part of it is untrue or all of it's untrue, and you should say it?
So that was a long question. So let me address as much of that as I can, and just someone remind me if I missed a part. So the tweets about the UAE, the tweets about the statistics about the percentage of the younger generations who have questions about the Holocaust narrative. That's just reporting facts. The statistics are. The comment about the UAE is, and when I say reporting facts, like that's what surveys show. Surveys show that more and more people are questioning this narrative. I didn't say that I'm questioning the Holocaust. I'm not a historian. That's not my area of expertise. Now, I do question the way that the Holocaust is used in order to further Israeli genocide and Israeli crimes. And everyone must be aware of this. In fact, the same polls I cited showed that I think 1/3 of American youth under the age of 25, this is off the top of my head, so I might be slightly off, but they believe that the Holocaust is used in a opportunistic way to cover for Israeli war crimes, to cover for Israeli genocide of Palestinians. And many Jews say this as well. Norman Finkelstein is the most popular commentator who is the descendants of Holocaust survivors, who is saying that the Holocaust is used, there's an industry that is used to further Zionist killing of Palestinians by invoking the Holocaust. So this is a simple point that I'm making as a critique of this strategy. About the UAE or other Muslim countries, There are so many genocides in history. Do you know how many Muslims were killed in the 20th century in Indonesia? Do you know the number? And who killed those Indonesian Muslims? How many were killed? And actually, not just the Dutch. Who killed them? Yeah, no one knows this number. Indonesian Muslims. How about UAE? Teach this genocide. How about we teach that in American schools about the genocide of Muslims? And the number, by the way, is 3 million. 3 million Indonesian Muslims were genocided by the Japanese and other factions in the 20th century, taken to labor camps and killed. So many genocides just of Muslims, not to mention other peoples, Africans, all in the past 100 years. So I think the genocide of Jews should be mentioned. The genocide of Christians should be mentioned in Russia. The genocide of Muslims in Iraq. The genocide of Muslims in Indonesia and Palestine, in Africa, in different parts of Africa. All of these should be a part of a comprehensive education instead of just focus on one particular historical event. That's a very simple critique, and I think any fair-minded person would agree, unless you think that Jews are actually special and they're God's chosen, and therefore we should all be focused one and only on that part in that particular crime against humanity. And I do think that it was a crime against humanity. I don't deny the Holocaust, and I've never denied the Holocaust. So unless you can show me where I've done that, I'd be interested to see, but it doesn't exist.
What about what you said about the students? What about what you said about the hoaxers? What about that?
Why do you think that that's referring to Jews as a race? When you noted that I tweeted that I do not put all Jews in one category. And as a Muslim, we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed, because the Quran itself makes a distinction.
Why did you insinuate it was Jewish for you on campus? Fine, I will give it to you that you didn't.
Because the Jewish groups on campus are Zionists. That's why.
Why would you insinuate that without any evidence?
Why did I insinuate it? Because it's an insinuation. It's not. I didn't say, yeah, the Jewish groups called in a bomb threat. That's not what I said.
That doesn't make it okay.
Wait, why does
people could do the same thing to the other group and it would still be Islamophobic? I call them Islamophobic when I see people do it. People think it's like if people were to insinuate, despite the broken Arabic, that it was a Muslim student, I would say that Islamophobic because there's evidence of that.
No. The Jewish groups on campus that are bringing IDF soldiers to talk and are being, the red carpet is being rolled out for them. The Jewish groups that are inviting this to campus, I don't consider them innocent, and I will make comments at their expense. I will insinuate whatever I want to insinuate about who is actually calling in a bomb threat to the college when my event is announced and the university will refuse to cancel it. I have my suspicions about who is behind that. Is it Muslims? Is it ISIS? Or is it Zionists? I wonder. So I will make those insinuations, and you have no right to tell me that I'm not allowed to do that.
I'm not saying you're not allowed, I'm saying it's not okay.
That's your opinion. It's not okay.
That's not okay. Thank you for your opinion.
Not good here.
Yeah, sisters.
Yeah, sisters first, right? Yeah, one question at a time, and we'll go back.
The shame is that if there is such an awareness of the Holocaust, then why do the same people who want us to be educated on the Holocaust are so dismissive of the genocide against Palestinians? That's the crime. That's the real scandal.
Any question from the sisters side?
I'm the only one, I guess.
Okay, sure, no problem.
All right. Actually, there's so many points I'd love to talk to you about. In fact, I had wanted to debate you, and there was not enough time. So just so you know, there was a Jew who was interested in responding to you, but there was just not enough time to figure it out. Maybe in the future.
Sure.
So I wanted to talk about the notion of the superiority of the Jews, which is, and I just want to share a little bit. Maybe you'll appreciate some of these ideas. So first of all, the notion of chosenness, which you've talked about, doesn't necessarily equate superiority. I know you quoted texts where it does, right? And I'm appalled by those texts, as all of us are, but there are some other ways of understanding it. I think we have this, the biblical text sees the Jews as the firstborn. So it doesn't mean the others are less human, it's simply that they're the firstborn and the others are the younger siblings in a way, right? So I think there is a way to understand chosenness in that way, and if you go to the Christian text, that is how they interpret the chosenness of the Jews, right? They say the firstborn and then all the nations will follow and be the younger sons and so forth. So I think that's what it is meant by chosenness in the biblical text. So a couple quotes to counterbalance yours. About the superiority of the Jews. Here's a beautiful one from Treatise Sanhedrin. It says this: "Man was created alone for the sake of the different families, so that they should not quarrel." In other words, there's only one common ancestor, Adam. And it was done so that nobody could boast, oh, I'm superior to you, or I'm a different species from you, right? So the idea that we all come from a common ancestor means we're all the same species, we're all equal, there's not a superior race to another. So that's an interesting quote, and I can give you the exact reference if you want. There's another beautiful story, and I'll end with that, I promise, about the fact that the God of the Jews is also the God of the nations. And it's a poignant story. When the Israelites are exiled from Egypt, they go through the Red Sea, and you know the story, I'm sure, and the Egyptians follow. And when the Israelites come out of the Red sea closes on the Egyptians and kills them. And at that moment, the Israelites burst into song, yes, we got them, and so forth. And so the angels, so this is a text of the Talmud, right? And so the Talmud tells the story that the angels wanted to join in, and sing along with the Israelites. And God looks at them and tells them, shut up, I don't want you to sing. Don't you see that my children are dying in the sea? It's a beautiful text, right? Where God is saying, yeah, you want to side with the Israelites, but they're all my children. And I am suffering right now because my children are dying in the sea, the Egyptians. So I just wanted to...
Where was that passage?
This is also Treatise Sanhedrin. I'll come up and give you the exact quotes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I'll surprise you. And I'll say that the Quran also mentions a certain preference that God has given the children of Israel. And you can find this in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter of the Quran, verse 122. And God says that, O children of Israel, remember my favor which I have bestowed upon you, and that I have preferred you over other peoples. But what is this preference? فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ is the Arabic. What is this fadl? Which is this is favor. And the interpretation is that this is the favor of sending many prophets. There are many prophets sent to the children of Israel, meaning the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That the preference is there's a long line of prophets. So guidance has been sent. But that preference does not mean that they have a genetic superiority or like a racial superiority. Within Rabbinic Judaism, that's the interpretation, that it is actually it's a racial superiority, and it comes from the lineage of Abraham. But in Islam, yes, it is a preference, but that comes with a higher responsibility. And when the Jews historically disobeyed God, as cited in the Quran, they were punished for that. When they worship idols instead of God, then they were punished for that. They basically broke the covenant. The eternal covenant. In Islam, we understand the eternal covenant is mithaq, the covenant with God, that we only worship God and no partners with Him. So that's the eternal covenant, and that's for all of humankind. And Jews specifically, the children of Israel, they have a responsibility because many prophets were sent to them, and when they disobeyed, then they were punished. So it's actually it's interesting, this idea of covenant and the difference between Judaism and Islam in that respect.
Let's go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I really liked your interpretation of it all and how you came to certain conclusions. There's just one thing that I might have a different approach on. That's just me. But I like hearing the other ones. And SubhanAllah, it says in the Quran, let them refer back to their book. And that's what my point is. So when you mentioned that Rabbinic Judaism influenced Zionism, I have a different approach to it. I feel more that Zionism has unfortunately created a monopoly on Rabbinic Judaism now, because a lot of my Orthodox friends on campus, they have come up to me and explained some of the things that you mentioned. Oh, no, this is a bad interpretation, this and that. And I said, that's great. I don't want that to be true. I don't want that to be your reality. But I told them, you cannot critique Daniel for showing you this, but then refuse to critique the Israel state for doing this in front of our face. So that's my only difference that I have with you, and I want to know your insight. I do not believe that Rabbinic Judaism influenced Zionism. I think Zionism influenced Rabbinic Judaism now in a way it's interpreted, because even Maimonides himself has said great things about Muslims, and a lot of rabbis really do have great views on Islam. So that's my only difference with you, and I want to know your interpretation.
Yeah, so how much of the blame do we put on Rabbinic Judaism versus Zionism? I think Zionism comes out of Rabbinic Judaism, and the threads are very clear to see. And part of the presentation was to explain that with evidence. But could we imagine Rabbinic Judaism today that did not involve massacring and genociding Palestinians? Yes, I do agree with that. Actually, before October 7th was happening, I was doing research on how, because most of what I've written about over the past 10 years and presented about and debated about has been about liberalism. Secular liberalism and this ideology that came from the Enlightenment that attacked all religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, how liberalism really destroys the mind, destroys civilization. That was the most of my critique. And I wanted to bring some historical evidence that shows how one of the first targets of liberalism was the Jews in Europe. And the Jews in Europe were ghettoized and were actually oppressed on the basis of their adherence to religion. So many of the arguments and the critiques that have been made against Islam, more recently and popularized because of the war on terror, saying things like, Islam has this kind of doctrine of war, Islam is intolerant, Islam is hateful, Islam requires women to cover, Islam doesn't give women their rights, etc., etc. Islam has corporal punishments like lashes and punishment for adultery and all of this. Those criticisms were actually developed against Jews in Europe. And Jews were the first targets of this kind of intense secularization. Either secularize or will literally, either kill you, detain you, exile you. So I was working on that project, and I still think that that's the case. Like, Jews have been traditional. They've wanted to practice their religion, and we can critique that religion just like they can critique Islam. But Zionism and this political Judaism that has taken over has created so much terrorism. It's created so much genocide, and we have to talk about it. I wish that more Jews would say very clearly that no, we don't accept this kind of Zionist project that is based on the extermination and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. But the vast majority of Jews are in support of it, unfortunately.
Hi, my name is Yago Ferrell. I'm also Jewish, and I kind of want to clear things up a little because I think there was a bit of a painting of a negative light with one of the previous Holocaust questions asked. So I want to give a little bit of preface where we can all acknowledge genocide is bad, and we all acknowledge, yes, also, if people who specifically focus on one, right, or people focus on this one genocide or proceed to completely not talk about either the rape of Nanking, right, where Japan will completely tear through China and sometimes Korea. And I kind of want to give things a clear up because I don't think you really got a fair chance. So this is more towards your personal opinion and like what you specifically think. I want to give you the chance, right, to kind of establish. And just for this specific question, right, number first, context second, so everyone knows you can clear yourself up. Specific question is, again, more on the earlier thing, is how many Jews died in the Holocaust? So, yeah, that's a question. One simple question, how many Jews died in the Holocaust?
Yeah, you give up the mic if you're only asking one question.
Oh, sure.
This is not interrogation.
Oh, no, sure.
Yeah, so like I said, I do not deny the Holocaust. I affirm everything that is legally required of me to affirm of the Holocaust. That's it. I believe that 6 million Jews were murdered by Hitler in the Holocaust. If someone says that 5,999,999 Jews were killed in the Holocaust, I consider them a Holocaust denier. And I think they should be punished to the full extent of the law. That's what I believe. So I don't know how else I can make it more clear. Oh, a sister has a question.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Daniel, for coming here. I do have 2 questions, I think. So the first one is, so I want to ask the professor here, and I want you to obviously add on to that. So I want to say, do you acknowledge that Jewish leaders and figures such as, Netanyahu are exploiting the concept of being God's chosen people for their own purposes? We can see that the Arabs and Palestinians are being referred to the Amaleks and the Ishmaelites, and every single argument I've heard is just like, we need to wipe the Ishmaelites out. They should not have been born and stuff like that. So I want to see, would you acknowledge that, or do you think it's just some misunderstanding?
What he's done, he's well documented, and whatever quotes he gave are absolutely. I wouldn't put it past them. The Israeli state right now is a right-wing state with. Sadly, racist ideology. So whatever he put there is fact. These are quotes. So.
Yeah. So I also want to add on, Daniel. Would you think that the common Israeli citizen has a genocidal mindset where they feel like it's okay for the Israeli government to be doing what it's doing in Gaza?
I don't have to give my opinion. There are statistics that show the percentage that support the current war. I think it's over 80%. Even before the war, 50% of Israelis believe that Israel should be cleansed of all Arabs. 50%, that's half, and maybe it's even more than that. There's shocking statistics, like over 10% or around 10% of Israelis view Baruch Goldstein as a hero. Who was Baruch Goldstein? He was a New York Jew who became a settler in Israel. And in Ramadan in 1994, he went to a mosque and he took a machine gun and slaughtered 29 Muslims who were praying, Palestinian Muslims who were praying, and about 100 were wounded. So this terrorist, he was killed on the spot by the survivors, but he's celebrated by 10%, and 43% of Israeli Jews can't decide, is he a hero or not? They're undecided on his status. So that's a huge percentage. And if you go to a Muslim country and say, oh, what do you think about, Abu Bakr Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, be condemned. Vast majority would condemn ISIS, vast majority condemn specifically ISIS, specifically that group. But this is the equivalent, and nearly half don't know whether he's a hero or not, and then 10% think that he is a hero. And Ben Gvir, the national security minister currently of Israel, has praised Baruch Goldstein as a hero, has a huge portrait of Goldstein in his living room and refused to take it down. So this is very shocking. There's just not enough awareness of internal Israeli politics. People don't really know how right-wing and fanatical many of these elements within Israeli society are. But it's bad news because they're only getting larger in terms of demographics. The birth rate is much higher for these specific groups that support kind of settler terrorism. They are growing in number. Vice reported that there's only about 15% of Israeli politics is left-wing at this point. It's massively overrepresented by hardcore right-wing. They believe in Israel being cleansed of Arabs completely, taking over the land. International law be damned. We don't care about international law. they don't show that side of Israel to the American population because Americans would be shocked. And they would just tank all support of Israel. But that's happening now anyway.
First of all, thank you for coming out, and thank you for the MSA for hosting you. My name is Donnie. I'm a Jewish student. On my way to this event, I was actually given a paper containing a bunch of quotes by you. Obviously, I'm not going to read any of them. I actually completely disregarded it almost immediately after getting it, because I don't think a short list of quotes, whether it's organized or not, that have no context, no background information at all, could possibly even come close to representing you, or what you believe, or what any Muslim would believe in any way. And I think you've mentioned a lot of this throughout your speech, that a lot of people like to attack Islam by bringing quotes, either just out of context, mistranslated, misinterpreted. But I also feel as though you have done this somewhat to the Jews with how you presented them. So what I would like to ask you is, do you believe that you have fairly and accurately represented Jewish belief? And if so, what percentage roughly of Jews do you think would agree with your characterization?
Which characterization?
Anything that you have, the majority of what you've said in the middle part of your presentation describing Jewish belief, in whether it comes to racism or anything related to that.
Thank you for your question. I believe everyone has biases. I don't think I'm particularly biased against Judaism as a religion per se. I think I've represented everything fairly and in the correct context with the correct meaning. I can't really present the full gamut of sources because of time constraints and the format of this presentation. It really needs like a full college course. But I believe that everything I've presented is accurate and fair representation of Rabbinic Judaism. If someone disagrees with that and they can bring the citations and prove me wrong, I'm more than happy to engage in that conversation. An honest conversation, not an apologetic one, like an honest academic conversation. And I was hoping that would happen today with a dialogue with other Jewish commentators. But feel free, if you don't think that what I said about the Talmud's view of black people, you don't think that was correct characterization, please prove me wrong. If you don't think that how I characterize the anti-Arab racism within the Talmud, please, prove me wrong. If you think that the Rabbi Schneerson quote, where he says that Jews are semi-divine and the whole purpose of creation was for Jews and everyone else is basically nothing, please, I want to know what does Schneerson actually think, the great Rabbi Schneerson, about non-Jews. Please, we want to have that conversation. We want to have that dialogue. And it happens when it's, an actual dialogue, not just name calling. So when people say, oh, Islam, has jihad, I don't engage in apologetics. I say, okay, this is a claim about Islam. Let's look at the texts. Let's look at what it means. And will often find that it contradicts liberal sensibilities and modern sensibilities. We'll actually find that. But I'm a believing Muslim. I believe that God revealed this religion, and God didn't reveal Islam to be conformant with what people today in our dystopian, dysfunctional world that we live in, what they think is right and wrong is always what is actually right and wrong, objectively, by what God has said. So people will point out that, Islam has these rules of war, has this and that. I'll point to, well, other religions have had it in the past as well, and is it really so bad, to have this or that policy? So I don't take the apologetic approach. I take an honest academic approach, and I like to think about things critically. So if I have misrepresented any part of what I've claimed, please feel free to call that out. Twitter, maybe you can even email the MSA, they'll forward it to me. And I'm more than happy to address those claims publicly and admit that I was wrong. As for what percentage of Jews actually know about this stuff, it's a very low percentage. But the claim that I made is that it's not just the awareness of the Talmudic texts that's the problem. The problem is that Rabbinic Judaism has influenced Jewish culture, and that has a ripple effect on the culture and the mindset of many Jews that gets them to act in quite shocking, radical ways, like celebrating a terrorist like Baruch Goldstein, or celebrating, the death of children by sleeping in a crib. Like, did that IDF soldier know about the Ishmaelite passages in the Talmud? Probably not. But still, why is he behaving in such an objectionable way? I mean, is there anyone in the audience who think the IDF soldiers were doing the right thing by mocking dead children? No one here, and I don't assume that of any Jew. I don't assume that of any Jew who comes here who would find that acceptable. Nonetheless, we are seeing these atrocities. Nonetheless, we're seeing, these starving Palestinians being shot at by the IDF, and where is the outcry against it? Where is the enough is enough? Where is the call for ceasefire? 80% of American Jews do not support ceasefire. 80%. When it comes to the rest of the population, the vast majority on the left, and even a majority on the right wing, over 50%, support a ceasefire. But when it comes to American Jews, 80% do not want a ceasefire. And even they claim, and it's because of their own internal dialogue, they say anyone who claims that we should ceasefire is an anti-Semite. So it's like internal policing of the Jewish community. That's very unfortunate.
Someone who hasn't asked, and then we'll go back.
Yes, hi. I'll be as brief as possible. I wanted to ask about an aspect of this that I think is overlooked. Often you've mentioned already within the course of your speech some of the common methods that's used against Palestinians, whether it be targeted strikes or IDF sniper assault. But I think we must recognize that Israel is a nuclear power, and I feel like that goes overlooked in a lot of these discussions, especially when you have messaging from the government, like the Amalek and the Ishmaelites of total destruction and annihilation. When you're talking about a state that has the capacity for that type of annihilation, potentially you have ministers and people in government positions discussing it openly, even though, I think the last case that I heard about that was months ago or weeks ago at this point, that a government officer mentioned the possibility. But the fact that it is there, how should that be factored in? And do you agree that it is overlooked and should be discussed?
Should we discuss the possession of nuclear weapons by Israel? Yeah, we should. I mean, it's a big concern because it's contrary to international law. It's contrary to international non-proliferation of nuclear power. So this affects many things. It's part of the landscape of the current world, that everyone can potentially be genocided at the drop of a bomb within a nation. And again, I don't think it's focusing on Israel. Yeah, Israel has these nukes, but so does the U.S. The U.S. has actually used nuclear weapons against the Japanese. The U.S. also has these kinds of weapons, and that should be part of the conversation as well. So nuclear armament, weapons of mass destruction, like these are all part of the equation. But in the future, I think these weapons are going to be less significant, actually, because it's just the cost is too great to risk the annihilation of your own population by using them. So the future of warfare is probably not going to be a nuclear one. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Oh, well, she wanted to ask, and then we'll come back. Oh, okay, she is another person.
Okay, hi. Thank you for coming again. I wish there was more spaces where, we could have these dialogues. So, one of your central claims kind of relied on the fact that a lot of the ideology that we see coming out of Israel and Zionist ideology is directly tied to Jewish religion and culture. But I think if you actually study Jewish community, it doesn't really seem to correspond to that. Most Jews in America are secular today. Certainly in Israel, most Jews in Israel have a degree of secularism. A third of Israeli Jews identify as Chiloni. A third of them also identify as traditional Masorati. So already the majority is not who you're describing. And you claim that, okay, just because they're secular doesn't mean they're not being influenced by their religious culture. But that doesn't really make sense either, because, the origins of the Zionist movement, they weren't just secular, they were also anti-religious. They did not like Judaism. They were trying to reinvent what Jewishness meant for another generation. So, and furthermore, I think that also gets supported by the fact that a lot of the headlines that you quote when Israeli soldier kills or rapes a Palestinian woman, they were coming from Israeli sources a lot of the time. You quoted yourself the Times of Israel article. So clearly, not every Jewish person, that's one of the most major newspapers, right? So clearly, not every single person, or Israeli Jewish. No, sure, but we're talking. This is one of the biggest newspapers in Israel, right? So, my question is, given all of this, don't you think, and given the history that most Jews aren't even religious today, and given the history of the modern day conflict of Israel-Palestine, that most Israeli Jews are growing up with, coming after the Second Intifada, where we can talk about if it's considered terrorism or if it's justified. That's not really the point. People are growing up in a climate where they walk to a pizza shop and it gets blown up, right? That's the culture. Don't you think it's a little dishonest for you to pretend this is purely a religious conflict rather than something that actually is based on real security measures or real conflict because of politics?
I mean, the kind of argument that you're advancing here is someone who says, "Oh, I'm not racist because I have a black friend." That's the kind of reasoning that you're using here. The majority. Let's accept some of these statistics that the majority of Israelis are not religious. Okay, but what do you say to this statistic from Pew that 79% of Israeli Jews believe that Jewish law should be state law? So that's 79%, or 29% believe that Jewish law should be state law. 79% of Israelis believe that Jews should get preferential treatment over non-Jews. So no one would agree that that's secularism or that's democracy when one specific race is preferred over other races. That's what 80% of Jews in Israel actually believe, and that's what's implemented. Israel is not a secular state. Israel is considered an apartheid state. Many international authorities have declared that Israel is an apartheid state, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. Former President Jimmy Carter even famously has claimed this, that Israel is an apartheid state. Why? Because they have laws that prefer Jews over non-Jews. Judaism is state-funded. Yeshivas, which are the religious schools there, are state-funded. Kosher food is state-funded. Jewish holidays are national holidays. Shabbat, Saturdays are considered days where the public transportation is shut down in observance of Saturday. Non-Jews need to take the bus. Well, too bad. It's Shabbos, so find some other way to get to your job or get to your house. It is a religious state. Okay, fine. Own up to that. Stop claiming that you're a democracy. Stop claiming that you're secular. Stop claiming that you don't care about religion. Stop. This is dishonest, right? If you want to be a Jewish state and implement Jewish law, stop claiming that you're the only democracy in the Middle East. Okay, so this is not, again, based on my opinion. These are facts. I can cite you all types of statistics from Pew. And getting into the violence, I cited the statistic that 50% of Israeli Jews want it to be exclusively the land of Jews. No Arabs. They want to completely clean Israel from all non-Jews. That's 50%. And where's that statistic coming from? That's coming from Western research agencies. So all of this is cited, all of this is well known, and I don't really see what you can dispute about it. The American Jews, are they secular, more secular? Yes. Ashkenazi Jews are more secular than those in Israel. But even within the so-called secular Jews, I think it was also 70%, 80% that believe that God gave Israel to the Jews. So how is that a secular belief to have if you believe that God gave you a particular piece of land? That sounds religious to me. And that's a religious belief that's at the center of this entire war and conflict. So yes, these passages, they do affect the wider Jewish culture. Not all Jews, because some Jews are aware of this history and they have been speaking out against it. I cited them in the presentation. Israel Shahak is an Israeli Jew. He's an Israeli Jew professor, and he's written extensively. He's the foremost expert on these types of critiques of Judaism. So there are Jews who are aware of this and are taking measures to fight back against it. Pretending like the problem doesn't exist is not helping anyone, especially not Jews.
Quick clarification. When you mentioned the Hamas rape stories, that particular woman, is that the same woman that was at the rave and that her family in Germany says she's back, or is that someone else? Because I just want clarification on it, because I hear different things.
No, this is a woman who was killed. She died. And what was claimed is that her underwear was not there. She wasn't wearing underwear. So some claim that she had been raped. Specifically, there's a relief organization called Zaka, and all of the atrocity propaganda that came in October comes from this one Israeli organization. And it is a disgusting organization because they have repeatedly, they've been proven liars over and over and over again. They were the source of the 40 beheaded babies claim. They're the main source for the mass rape claim, but they have no forensic evidence. They have no evidence to actually back up any of their claims, but somehow their voices get to the New York Times and are mass distributed. The founder of Zaka, actually, he's an interesting person. He committed suicide. You know why he committed suicide? Because he was accused of raping his own children, and he killed himself before he could be held accountable for those alleged crimes. That's the source of this kind of atrocity propaganda.
Go ahead.
So I haven't spoken in a while, so I'm back. So actually, you're gonna love this. This is my parting gift to you. So you just said just before this last question that 50% of Jews want a Jewish state, right? And that
29%.
Sorry, 29%, and that we don't know what to do with the Palestinians, and we want a pure state, and so forth.
Yeah, that's
right?
50%.
That's 50%, right? So I want to respond to that because this, I believe, with you is a worrying trend, right? And I'm going to say why. One of the most authoritative texts in the Jewish tradition, which is the Bible, the Tanakh, actually speaks about the ideal Jewish state. And I want to share this text with you because you're going to love it. So this is an eschatological text. This is a text which is talking about the ideal Israel in Messianic times, and it does three things. It marks out the borders, right, which includes, of course, all the disputed territories. It talks about the rebuilding of the temple. But then there's a small detail that many Jews don't talk about and maybe have forgotten. And I think it is a crucial detail because it is the only detail which involves our action. The rebuilding of the temple is not us. The borders is not us. This is God's actions. But this third detail is the human action. Let me read it to you. You are to distribute this land. So this is in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47, a prophet who talks about the Messianic times. You are to distribute this land among yourselves, according to the tribes of Israel. Okay. You are to allot it as an inheritance for yourselves, and now here's the key, for the foreigners residing among you and who have children. Well, I'm continuing. You are to consider them as native-born Israelites, these foreigners. Along with you, they are to be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. This is a very powerful text. It's basically saying Israel is meant to be a shared land between Israel and the foreigner, in this case, the Palestinian, I would think, perhaps, right? In other words, and I just want to emphasize this is not a pragmatic vision. This is the ideal vision that God had for Israel, that it be a shared state, one state solution in a way, from the river to the sea, right? But it would be a shared state where power would be shared between the Israelite and the foreigner, in this case the Palestinian, and where the foreigner would get an equal share as the Israelite. So, and this is the most authoritative text in the Hebrew tradition, and I really am saddened that most Zionists today are ignoring the true Zionist vision in the biblical text. That is never supposed to be an ethno-state, never supposed to be a purely Jewish state, always supposed to be a shared enterprise. So I wanted to give you this as a parting gift.
Sure, go ahead.
That's kind of like not true when you open the Talmud, it actually states that when
Mashiach comes, that approximately 2,800, like each Jew would have 2,800 non-Jews as slaves. So that's not really.
No, but this. Yeah, so the eschatology means what's going to happen in the end times. So there's eschatology in in Islam and Christianity and Judaism. So I mean, your vision. I don't have the passages in front of me, but I trust that you read them, and I think that's your interpretation doesn't match with rabbinic Judaism, to say the least. So within the eschatology found in rabbinic Judaism, you see the Talmud saying that each Jew will have 2,800 Gentile slaves. And just like Rabbi Eliezer Keshtiel at B'nai David was saying, they will want to be our slaves. The Gentiles will want to be our slaves because we don't have these genetic problems and we're superior. So the belief of rabbinic Judaism and your beliefs, they might not be completely aligned. I'm more concerned about the beliefs that the people in power in Israel have and the major Zionists in the U.S. have, and even within the city of New York. Like their beliefs, I think, are significant, and that's why we need to study them and study these texts. But I really appreciate your gifts. Thank you.
Can I just do a little follow-up?
Sure, go ahead.
So I wonder why no one over there has mentioned this on the Jewish side, but and this is something maybe that's important to remember, that the only authoritative text in Judaism is supposed to be the biblical text, right? The Talmud, and I know we might disagree on this and maybe we can talk more about it, the Talmud actually doesn't have a clear stance. If you've read the Talmud, they will say one thing and then the opposite, and then one thing and then the opposite. There's never any moment where a credo, right, is established in the Talmudic text. So it's a kind of an open conversation which never leads to law, right? The Talmud is not capable of prescribing law, only the Bible. So it's not my opinion, right? I'm talking about the most authoritative text. Where I agree with you is that this authoritative text and the description of this ideal one-state solution is being ignored right now by the current Zionist government, to its detriment, in my view. So I just want to emphasize that whatever is written in the Talmud...
Well, what you read from the Torah actually did not disqualify the Talmudic interpretation, because you can share the land with your slaves. Your slaves are living with you on the land of Israel.
Yes, but here clearly it's not slaves, right? This is an equal, I don't know if you see the language, right? They are to have an equal inheritance with you, right? And they are to be treated like native-born Israelites. So I thought you would like this gift, this parting gift.
What was the...
Why are you resisting me right now?
Sorry. Ezekiel, what was it? What was
Ezekiel 47.
Which verse?
Oh, I have to look. Verse 22, verse 21 and 22. So I just want to emphasize that the Talmud, yes, says many things, and its opposite, right? And has never been seen as an authoritative document by Judaism.
The translation that I'm reading is saying, "You shall divide this land among you according to the tribes of Israel. You shall allot it." So, according to the tribes of Israel, you shall allot it as an inheritance for yourselves and for the sojourners. So you said foreigners who reside among you and have had children among you. They shall be to you as native-born children of Israel. With you, they shall be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So I'd have to see what the rabbis say about it. But the point about the Talmud being a collection of divergent opinions, I disagree. The rabbinic Judaic understanding is that, do you agree that the Talmud is the oral law?
It's the oral it's called law, but it's discussions. Again, there's...
Was it given to Moses, though?
No.
No? Okay, well then you're way out of the fold of...
Maybe, yeah. There's no law that can come out of the Talmud, right? It's not enough for it to take out of it. And maybe, I wonder if the Jews on the other side could elaborate on that because they might know more than me on this point. But I would love for them to add to what I'm saying here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing that you should also note is that I cited the Talmud, but there's more than the Talmud. There's also the Midrash, like those kinds of texts. But you would have the same view because they're coming from rabbis as well. But then there's the like the Mishnah Torah and the works of Maimonides or the Shulchan Aruch from Joseph Caro. So those are authoritative. They're considered authoritative books of law, and they're deriving the law not only from the Torah or the Tanakh, but also the Talmud. So you're, I think, a heretic according to Rabbinic Judaism. But if there's someone else, a Jewish person wants to back up your view, that we'd like to hear from them. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's pointing at you.
Where are you pointing to?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more to it than you're simply saying. A lot of, just to address my own point also, a lot of what you said has been taken out of context, pushed in a way that the general audience here wouldn't understand in its proper context. It's just, some of it is just wrong. Some of it doesn't really make sense.
Can you explain the context of sexual relations between a Jewish man and a Gentile woman that Maimonides speaks of in the Mishnah Torah, and he says that the Gentile should be put to death. Can you explain the context of that?
Jews generally have an obligation to marry Jews, and
What's the punishment if you don't, according to the law, if you marry a non-Jew?
That's one of the things, is that the Mishnah Torah is not a authoritative law book.
Maimonides is not an authority in Judaism?
He is a authority.
Who is the greatest scholar of the Torah?
That doesn't exist.
Legal scholar of the Torah.
Doesn't exist.
Well, according to the rabbinic Jewish tradition that I've been reading, and academics, they say that the Rambam is the top rabbi.
Because he's a philosopher. And academics
No, Jews. No, this is what Jewish Orthodox Jews say.
Learn all the different law books.
Okay, back to the question.
All right. Anyway, so just there's a lot of things you've gone wrong. I just wanted to address the race thing. Race is a Western concept that Judaism did not have. To even define Judaism as a race is simply disingenuous.
So you disagree with Rabbi Keshtiel that I quoted, where he says, "Yes, I am a racist."
Absolutely.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. You disagree with Rabbi Schneerson.
Oh yeah, he was a bipolar heretic who started a cult, and his followers think he's the Messiah. They're heretics. I would 100% say that.
Okay, so throw Maimonides under the bus, Schneerson under the bus,
He's cool.
Okay, he's cool, but he said that if a Jewish man has sex with a Gentile woman, she should be killed even if she's 3 years old. So you fail to explain the context of that.
Yeah, he says some things. I disagree with them. I'm okay with saying that. You said own it. I'm owning it. There are different law books. There are different things that different people say. I don't think you should simply cherry pick, as you were saying before, the ones that we find the worst. And I think you should really study Jewish law. Find a rabbi. There are rabbis on campus, and really look at Jewish law and see what the conclusions that Jewish scholars of millennia have come to. Because to just point to one rabbi and say, "Oh, this is Jewish law," is simply disingenuous. Because there are plenty of people who disagree with them.
It's not just Maimonides. There's many. Joseph Caro also has the same opinion about sex with Gentile women. Punishment is death, on analogy with bestiality. So, yeah, I mean, this is you just owned it. So you said it's cool. Okay, I think that speaks for itself.
Listen, I just wanted to say that you made a lot of mistakes there.
Yeah, I want to know the mistakes. You just said that I'm reading it out of context. I asked you for the context, but you said I own it. So what was the mistake from my part? I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be unfair to Jews. I don't want to be fair to Christians. I don't want to be fair to atheists. I don't want to be unfair. I want to be completely 100% fair and accurate. So if I make a mistake, point it out, and show me the error of my way so I can correct myself. That's the only way we learn and grow.
Are you inviting him right now to do that?
He was asking me a question about, or he's supposed to ask me a question, but it seems like he just made a statement.
Yeah, so like, you're right, I didn't really get to a question. I was just trying to, all right, so my question would be that, you made some statements in the past. How would you, how would you,
No, it's okay. Take it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's everyone just be quiet and let him gather his thoughts. It's fine. Or you can just take a seat, gather your thoughts, and then ask the question. No problem. This is not.
What age was Muhammad's wife?
Okay. He wants to go that way. He can go that way.
I mean, the same could be asked what were the age of Solomon's wives, but we could go into that.
Should we all answer at the same time? I think we should all answer him at the same time.
No.
9 years old. 9 years old. Any other questions about Prophet Muhammad?
Yeah, so
I mean, this question about age of marriage, appropriate age of marriage, this is like the go-to. There's no other answer that anyone has. You can't explain Maimonides. You can't explain the rabbinic Jewish tradition. You can't even explain parts of the Torah. You just have to attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Jews are the last people to criticize the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for this. You're the last people to criticize because this is something that is acceptable according to Jewish law. And your prophets have been recorded throughout history as practicing this marriage at the biological age of puberty. This is something that every pre-modern culture and tradition has practiced, including Jews, and it's encoded and enshrined in Jewish law. So how are you, like, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face? Like, why would you attack Muslims or the Prophet Muhammad for this specific thing? For this specific thing. Same with Christians. Like, Christians attack, how old was Aisha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ? Like, this is some kind of trump card. Say, how old was Mary? When God impregnated her without consent. What is that? Okay. I would never make that argument against Christians because I believe in Jesus, peace be upon him, and the Virgin Mary. I know that Jews don't. But I would never use an argument against Christians that is going to be twice as bad for my own religion. That would be inconsistent. It's intellectually and morally inconsistent. So yes, I will defend this practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I have debated it. I've defended it in multiple ways. I'm proud to do so. I'm proud to do so because there's a rational and clear explanation. Yeah, it's not something that's practiced in modern society. Instead, what's practiced in modern society are the 9-year-olds are dating and having sex in the playgrounds, in the school bathrooms. They're having sex in public schools at the age of 8, 9. By the age of 11, you have 30% of minors have been sexually active by the age of 11 in this country. So they're having sex. It's just not married sex. It's just fornication. It's just degeneracy. That's what is eroding society, the modern world. I wish that some of these Jewish laws would be practiced. I wish that some of these Jewish laws about marriage and propriety, modesty, dignity, I wish that they would be practiced. The U.S. would be a much better place if laws of modesty were practiced, laws of sexual decency were practiced. But instead, we have Jews throwing it under the bus just to, own the Muslims. That's sad. Yes.
So on campus, whenever we have pro-Palestine events, typically a bunch of Zionists will come over and we do openly discuss conversations with them, and they either have two bases of argument. It'd be they have religious ties to the land, quote unquote, Israel, and then the other one would be an argument saying that they're quote-unquote indigenous, even though like I've shown them multiple articles that prove that the Arabs are more indigenous to the land than they are. So why do they use that argument if science has proved otherwise?
You know, they're not concerned about facts. They're not concerned about reality. The genetic testing shows that the Palestinians are Jews who converted to Islam. That's the genetic reality. Like they're coming from an Israelite background and they converted to Islam. Like genetically, the Palestinians and the not the Ashkenazi but the Sephardic Jews and the other ethnic Jews are very similar genetically. So I don't know why they use debunked arguments and complete lies, but that's what we've seen. That's what we've seen over and over again.
Yeah, and also like when I show them the information in the articles, then they'll like label us as anti-Semitic, and I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, they keep using this term anti-Semitic, but it's losing any kind of value, and it's a shame because there are people who they genuinely hate Jews, like in this kind of rabid way, and they're anti-Semites, and this is completely condemned in Islam. We do not accept this hatred of a particular race, because why? God created every person, God created every race, and the Jews are a race. We can't just, oh, you're a Jew, therefore I hate you, or therefore you're evil. This is contrary to basic Islamic understanding of the world and Islamic understanding of humanity. So those are real anti-Semites who have this kind of racism. But I criticize Israel, I criticize some of these aspects of rabbinic Judaism, therefore I'm an anti-Semite. This is losing all its meaning. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what someone else was discussing beforehand about something that came up often tonight was the representation of Judaism and questioning you about it. And I kind of had my own response because I feel that when you're looking at the oppressor and you're looking at the victim, I think the oppressor is represented enough. And this lecture wasn't based off the principles of Judaism and how to have Jews represented. And I think it was based off what is going on in Palestine, and you did provide the texts that were necessary. So obviously you're not going to be providing A, B, and C of what Judaism is. I don't think that you disrespected their religion, and that wasn't the point of tonight's lecture. But if we are discussing the ongoing genocide in Palestine, then we will be outlining the texts that are showing what's allowed, such as the rape and the murder if you don't marry someone who's Jewish, as you stated, right? So I think that we should be less caught up with representing someone who is doing the oppressing, who is doing the killing, and think about the victim and what they're experiencing and where they come from. And also, one of the first topics that come in when this genocide is discussed is religion. It's obviously hard not to. As a Muslim myself, and as all of us, what else are we going to talk about? The Palestinian Christians are extinct. So who we speak of is who we know. We speak of our religion. We speak of what we've been brought up with. On the other hand, I feel like automatically, obviously, this whole lecture of Judaism is a big part of why this genocide is going on. What is in the mission of an Israeli's heart, or whatever is going on, right? But I find it unfair to place that like what you're trying to achieve on the basis of Judaism, and then use Judaism to kind of excuse it at the same time. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, go ahead. Or just
Thanks for coming here tonight. I have a question vis-a-vis what you said about Hamas. And you said that since 2000 they have not targeted civilians. I am curious, what do you think they were doing during the Second Intifada when they famously got a fatwa from Sheikh Kawadari and Qatar allowing them to do this? They actually they claimed responsibility for multiple suicide bombings during the Second Intifada, which, as you know, since you were alive then, was after the year 2000. So how do you reconcile this with your view of Hamas?
Yeah, so the exact date, there was the exact date where Hamas says that in the past we have, but now we do not target civilians. Maybe I got the date wrong. Maybe it was not 2000. But that shift did take place, and it was acknowledged by international parties that Hamas has declared that they will not engage in these types of suicide attacks. When it comes to Islamic law, when you are deliberately going to a civilian place, like it's not even to target any kind of soldiers, so we're not talking about collateral damage, but to deliberately go where civilians are and to kill them in a way that it's going to most likely kill women and children, this is not allowed by consensus in Islam. So if there are fatwas saying otherwise, then I'd have to look at those fatwas, but if they exist, I'd say that they're just simply incorrect. And I've written about this, terrorism and Islamic law. I have a video on it as well on my channel, but yeah, that's, without more information, I can't speak more on that.
Sure.
Because I find it hilarious that the Israelis
Use this mic.
I just find it hilarious that the Israelis like to bring up Hamas all the time and not go to the origin of the problem. The origin of the problem is the occupation, what happened in the Nakba. Israel went into villages, cities, and towns. There's a documentary called Tantura. There was no Hamas in 1948. It was just the Palestinians. They went in, they laugh. To this day, they're alive. These 90-year-old war criminals, the massacre in Tantura. There was no Hamas at that time. The same thing happened in 1967, 1973. So I ask the Israelis, if you're asking us to condemn Hamas, do you condemn the Nazi Zionist occupation stealing our land? Don't come here and ask us to condemn Hamas. Condemn your government for continuing to oppress my people, steal our land, and don't cry when they respond. Okay? We could talk about how we respond, but the origin is clear. The problem: occupation, settlement building, and plain murder. So, if the solution to destroy Hamas is very simple: get the hell out of Palestine, get the hell out of the West Bank, get the hell out of Gaza, and let's have our own country, period. That's how you destroy Hamas. If you want a quick way to destroy Hamas.
Yeah, so just to add on that, I mean, it's a good point. When we look at who is leading Israel right now, you have the Likud party, you have Netanyahu. Where is Likud from? Likud originated from Irgun, the terrorist faction that was responsible for things like the King David Hotel bombings and other kinds of massacres, the Deir Yassin massacre. Irgun and Lehi. Lehi is another terrorist organization. The leader of Lehi became the prime minister of Israel in 1983. So Israel's political class today is led by terrorist groups. They've just rebranded and they've been absorbed into the Israeli government. So this is, if we want to talk about terrorism and contextualize the actions of Hamas, even though we say that this is wrong, but it has a larger context. It has a larger context, and nowhere did I condemn October 7th and the actions of Hamas. I consider, like other international authorities, that Palestinians engage in resistance. They engage in a resistance act in a war against their occupier, and they have the right to do that. So I just want to make that very clear if I hadn't been clearer before.
Last question. This is the last question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I want to know, how do you define race? Because you keep referring to Jews as a race, when that's not true. Jews are an ethnicity and a religion, that's an ethno-religion. So I just want to know, what is your definition of race, so we can be on the same page? Because usually in the past, throughout history, the racialization of Jews has been used as the purpose to persecute them. So I just wanted you to clarify that, because I've seen that in your other writings as well, where you refer to a Jewish race. So can you please define race for me?
I think that there are biological distinctions between people, biological distinctions that can be traced to genetics and through lineage, and this is recognized, universally in cultures. What distinguishes Jews is a specific lineage, and this is actually referred to in Islam and in the Quran as Bani Israel, the children of Israel. It's a biological distinction. So the term that I use is race, and that corresponds pretty accurately. So races do exist, and God says in the Quran, Allah says in the Quran, that He's created people with multiple colors and multiple tongues. the differences that we have between us, Allah has created, God has created, and so that we'll know each other and appreciate, the power of Allah to make us so similar but also so different. Racial supremacy, on the other hand, to say that one race is superior or one race is inferior, this is completely against Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ, Muhammad, said that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, and no white is superior to a black, or vice versa. This is a clear teaching of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and this is what Muslims have upheld for 1400 years. But this kind of anti-racism is not found within Rabbinic Judaism. I know that many Jews today are anti-racist, but their religion, technically speaking, according to the passages that I cited and many others, is not.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.